You're on.
Go.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. We've been shooting the breeze for the last 20 minutes or so because we have to get here early and practice the presenter and stuff like that. And we've been telling stories about how long our hair used to be and how it can cover all the way over the top and stuff like that. And so Rory's got a big grin on his face. And that was a good introduction to the fact of what we're going to do today, because Randall is going to take us back through his life of Astro Imaging. He's going to tell us about all the mistakes he has made. I edited his show earlier, and he's no longer going to be telling us about all the mistakes he's made, just the significant ones that will teach you about astrophotography. At any rate, before we get into that, I would like my good friend Rory, with his very long hair under his cap, tell us about what is happening with our workshop. So Rory, take it.
All right, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I can.
All right. So if you guys go over to the astroimagingchannel.org and you go to TAIC workshops, you can scroll down here and you'll see an image submitted by Kevin Moorfield. And we had two images come in already by Goran and George Albrecht. And the data set is phenomenal. The images are really clean. This is a telescope down in Chile. And so you could download the files right here. You'll see where it says get zip file here, edit that data, and then come back and submit it right here. And we'll present it on August 27th. You have till August 13th to submit that data. And if you would like to do a little 5-minute presentation or so, just going over your workflow, very relaxed atmosphere. We'd love to see kind of one or two things that you think made your image pop. So head over to the astroimagingchannel.org, download that file, and submit it here. And we're looking for about 5 or 6 people maybe to give us a presentation on that day. So that's all I got. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Rory. And I just wanted to remind you that a couple of us have already processed that data, and it really is stunning data. It makes for beautiful pictures. So download it and see what you can get out of it. I also hope that everybody here has heard that I found a supernova in my images of M101. I later found out that other people had found it before me, but I was sighted there for a few seconds. So I was glad of that. Now, I want to tell you what's coming up next week, because we're getting close to the anniversary show, which is a big deal to me because I think it's important to to know what's happening in the world as a whole of TAIC. Randy's on today. Ron Brecher is going to be coming to tell us about some new masks next week in Flix Insight. And then the whole team will get together and we're going to report on how the channel is doing, the views, some of the demographics, some of the things we need to work on, some of the things that we think we're doing really well, tell you about some of the changes we made over the last year to make things better for you, stuff like that. And then I don't know if Matt Gowrie's going first. I hope so. And she's going to tell us about Mac imaging. And then I'm going to tell you about off-axis guiders. And then we've got a number of really good presentations coming up for you in the near future. We get all the way through July 30th before we have some open dates for us all. And so I hope you join us for that. But we're doing well. Don't forget that if you think that you can make a contribution to this community, just hit the contact button, tell us who you are and what you want to talk about, and we'll check you out and we'll work on that with you. Don't forget, over here, there's 38, 40 people watching right now, and you can put in all your comments, you can ask your questions, and occasionally we'll interrupt and we'll ask the questions for Randall, and you can get your questions answered about all the mistakes that Randall has made in his life. You know, that's enough for me. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to ask our dear friend Randall to tell us about all the mistakes he's made in his life of astro imaging. What should you have learned, Randall?
Oh, there are so many things. I've damaged equipment. I've thrown away good data. And I've made some financial decisions with equipment and software that I regret. And we'll talk about that today, what my biggest software financial regret has been. So we'll talk about those different kinds of things. And then I've got some mods that are really inexpensive that fit my budget, but have made a world of difference as well. So not only the mistakes, but some of the successes, and one of them I'm really proud of, and it made just one aspect of astrophotography so much easier for me. And we'll go through that when we get there, and we'll talk about some little tweaks that just make a world of difference.
Okay, let's see that PowerPoint about what you've learned.
Okay, great. Let me get that rolling. Okay, can everybody see my title page there? Are we good?
I'm not seeing it.
Nope, not yet.
Okay, hold on. Hold on. I know what I got to do here. I got to start the share. Sorry about that, gentlemen.
Molly's not with us tonight, so he can say gentlemen. Oh, no, Gowrie's here. There was.
Yes,
where is
yes.
Gowrie?
There we go. And
Gowrie's in her observatory imaging. So.
And there we go. And can everybody see my slide? My first slide.
Yep, you're good now. There you go.
Okay, great. Again, I'm Randall Kayfes and retired, and I think it's about the seventh time I retired now. They keep calling me back, but again, we want to talk about mistakes and successes, and really just a lot of mods and decisions that led to poor Astro Imaging and good Astro Imaging. And I would have to say that the reason we're talking about what I wish I knew in the beginning is because I'm not that far from the beginning. Between all of you, I think you could really just slice me up with your experiences, but I think I'm close enough that we can talk about Astro Imaging and the mistakes I made. I did start in 1976 with an 4-inch f/15 EdgeCorp doublet refractor, 5-foot wingspan. You can see it right behind me.
Hang on for a second.
Okay.
Tim, are you getting that note about the echo? Okay, keep talking, Randall.
Okay.
But not necessarily. Yeah, just keep talking and see what happens.
Okay, you bet. I absolutely love this particular telescope, f/15. I used it on Jupiter this year, and the sharpness, albeit small size, but the sharpness of Jupiter was ultra fantastic for me in this old scope that just doesn't let me down. I put it on my CGEM DX, and it just works flawlessly for me. My background is in IT. My last career choice was IT, and that brings some tips for all of us, I think, in astrophotography. And one is when you're presented with problems, and astrophotography, I think, almost seems to be it's like solving problems endlessly, and then you get your astrophotography, but always looking for the simplest solution to those problems. And that we do that in IT all the time, trying to find the simplest solution to a problem. And the other thing we learn in IT is, and this is a tip that I've taken with me throughout my life, which is fix one problem at a time with one solution at a time. So many times in astrophotography, we'll have a problem, we can't solve it. We go to cloudy nights, or we go to the Astro Imaging channel, we get 6 answers, and we try to shove all of those 6 answers into a solution, and then we don't know which of those 6 answers solve the problem, and we don't know which of the 5 others caused the new problems that we've got. So in IT, we learn fix one thing at a time with one solution at a time, and then move on if you still have a problem. And so I think my IT career has helped me with that a great deal. Are we still having an echo problem? We good? Okay. Excellent. The other thing that I want to let beginners know is that astrophotography, in my opinion, is the hardest photography you can get into in every single aspect. Other fields of photography don't make you a great astrophotographer, but the thing that I want to impress upon beginners is this is a very, very hard field of photography. There are so many aspects that don't translate into landscape photography, portrait photography, wedding photography, just so many things that don't translate back into other fields, including photon dynamics, camera technology, computer technology. In astrophotography, we have to know so much about this field to get proficient. Everything from Wi-Fi to bandwidth, USB, portability, darks, bias, flats, you name it. We have so much to learn with astrophotography. And I think astrophotography is really starting to take off. I hear so many people getting into it. And I would really just like them to know that, yes, it's going to be hard. You have a lot to learn. It feels like a fire hose, you know, straight off the hydrant right in your face, and you're trying to drink it all. But just stick with it, and you can endure. And just know that yes, it is hard, and it's hard for every beginner. The other thing that's I think important for beginners is know that your interest in astrophotography can and most likely will change. The thing about portrait photography is portrait photography is portrait photography. Astrophotography can be planetary, can be nebula, can be galaxy, can be EAA, electronically assisted astronomy. There are so many different subsets, and each of those subsets of astrophotography, the beginner may be overwhelmed with, well, I bought this equipment. Why doesn't what I bought for visual work with, it works good with planetary, but why doesn't it work with this wide field nebula that I'm trying to take a photograph of? And the idea is that your equipment in astrophotography tends to be a whole lot more specific. And you have to be careful that the equipment that you do buy and start out with is versatile enough to take you to the areas that you want to go into, the different fields of astrophotography that you want to get into. And so try to think before you buy about what you're getting into. And there are lots of YouTube videos out there to help you figure out which equipment is going to be best for you and the fields that you want to get involved in. And some of that equipment is a little bit more versatile than others in allowing you to hyperstar, focal reduction. There are certain scopes that will be better for that to allow you some versatility. Yes, your photos won't be as good as that very specific equipment for that very specific target you're looking for. And I have a friend who's got a telescope for every type of object you'd ever want to photograph. I got another friend who's got a telescope they call the SMART telescope. And both of them are very happy with their astrophotography. They're very happy with what they do, but just realize that for the beginner, it's a lot to take in, and the equipment really, really does matter. And you can box yourself in by choosing equipment that isn't good for what you're really trying to do. And so many times we take visual equipment and try to adapt that to astrophotography, and we find that we're not getting the results that we want to get. One thing that I kind of do often is I look at cost per, and this is a little, if you look at this table here, it kind of gives you an idea of what I'm talking about. And people will tell you that astrophotography is a hole in the sky into which you throw your wallet, and that can be true, but you can do certain things to mitigate that. And that's some of the things I'm going to talk about, is some things to mitigate the cost expenditures. And if you look at my 9.25 SCT coming in at $4,300, that's $21.50 per photo that I've kept. Not all the photos that have stacked to create those 200 photos, but if you just look at the 200 photos that I really like, $21.50 for each of those photos. But if you take a look at the Coronado and you add it with the 8-inch Schmidt and my 4-inch doublet, which I've had 0 photos taken from, you can see that my grand total is $5.04 per photo for all the telescopes that I own. And that's sharing mounts and other equipment. But it's interesting to look at. And when your spouse complains about what it's costing your equipment, you can maybe throw back, well, it only cost me $5.04 per photo. I don't know if that'll help or not, but these are things that all of us know unequivocally, that size matters, that large focal length, small focal length matters for your target, and that what all of this means, the oversampling, undersampling, we could spend easily 3 nights of the Astro Imaging channel talking about just these things. And I've got the website in there to help you kind of get your camera and your telescope aligned so that you realize that you're combining the best equipment together to get the results that you're looking for. And this is something I didn't seriously take. I had no idea when I started in astronomy. It was either a 4-inch refractor or it was a 10-inch or 8-inch Newtonian, whatever. The choices were really simple. Today, the choices aren't very simple. And you really do have to do your homework to make sure that you don't waste money on equipment that you're never going to use or you're not going to like the results thereof. So big mistake number 1 is picking the wrong equipment, not doing your homework, not doing your research. And this astronomy tools / calculators is fantastic in not giving you definitive answers, but giving you kind of green for a great decision, a great combination of scope with camera, to yellow, it's okay. And then you got the red that's, you're really kind of outside what you really should be doing with this camera paired with this telescope. So one of the decisions there. And that mounts are another one where things have changed dramatically since I first got into astronomy. And the problem with mounts is that you make your purchase, you pretty much stick with it a lot of the times. And then for us astrophotographers versus people who go to star parties and do EAA, you're looking at sturdy versus portable. But now with these new the planar drives, you're looking at expensive versus portability or non-portability. And so again, the mount you pick tends to be more of the one that kind of sticks with you. So pick the mount right. In landscape photography, we say pick the correct lens. In astrophotography, we say pick the right mount. Make sure you get a good mount. I have picked good mounts in the past. I think my CGM DX, some people would say that's not a good choice, but ultimately with the help of Starizona and Dean, the owner, I've been able to really tweak that, and I'll talk about that. I've tweaked that mount into a really good mount for me to use. So the bottom line is mounts are important. And the other thing that I've kind of hinted at is we talked about there are YouTube channels that are out there that will help you not make expensive equipment mistakes. Make sure you're getting the correct camera per telescope, the correct mount for what you want to do. And these are my favorite YouTube channels: the Astro Imaging channel, Patriot Astro. He does everything Nina. If you're into Nina as opposed to the other software that's out there. The Lazy Geek, I got to tell you, I love this guy for one reason, is that he's totally honest about his failures and his mistakes so that you don't make those same mistakes. He's just fantastic about that. James Lamb, he's great about not just telling you what he thinks is a good product or a good technique or a good mod. He has test results to back up what he's talking about. So James Lamb. The other one is Deep Space Astro, and he knows everything about Cyril, and I just love that. And finally, Sharp Cap forums by Dr. Glover. You can go to a lot of forums and get a lot of different answers, but if you're talking EAA and live stacking, he's got the answer. You give him your specific information, your scope, your camera, and he'll tell you how to make it work, and it's not guesswork. It's absolutely backed up by experience and science. So I absolutely love the Sharp Cap forums. I go there constantly to get good information. And then Luke Omatico gave me some great information about Pix Insight, which I'll share in just a minute. And I think he's really accurate in a lot of the stuff that he presents. Now, as far as computers go and networking and technology, howtogeek.com is the most fantastic website you can go to get technology information, networking, computers, you name it, USB, bandwidth. How to Geek will get you there, and it's in plain English. It's really simple to follow along. So these are my some of my favorite YouTubes and websites that can help you through a lot of the decisions for the beginner and the experienced ones as well. So I think I'll start with doing things kind of in order, and the mistakes I've made is not doing some things that I should have done in the daytime. And why would you do things during the daytime? Well, you can see what you're doing. You can avoid the feeling of being rushed because you're wasting dark skies, and you perhaps can avoid doing a major equipment damage, which I did by not doing daytime setup and kind of testing run through. You can do your calibrations, the flats you can do with the LED panels nowadays. And I really lucked out and got a great LED panel. I know that some people go out and they'll get a bad one, and that's a mistake you don't want to make. But I lucked out. I got a great LED. I got it at a great price, and I do. My flats are just so easy to do, and I can get them done and over with during the daytime. Get my light train all set up the way it's going to go that night and go to town. So those are some of the positives of doing daytime activities. Your tripod, one of the things that I do that I have done is I've marked where my legs go. I'm talking tripod legs. And put the same legs in the same spot every time on these marks. It maintains the level of the tripod, and it also helps ensure that the polar alignment is going to work accurately for me. One of the things I've done with my mount is I tried taking it apart at night, so I couldn't see what I was doing that well. And I took two of the three bolts off of the mount that hold the mount to the tripod. I took two of the three bolts out, and then the mount leaned very, very heavily to the counterweight and bent the remaining third bolt, which was still in the telescope. Thank heaven it did, because it stopped the mount from hitting the ground. But you now know what mistake I did. It was dark. I didn't see that I hadn't taken the counterweight off yet. And so daytime activities, if I would have done that, I could see that I was about to make a huge mistake. Anyway, the other thing that you can do with your mount is, of course, you'll see my 9.25 Celestron. I've got the different weight markings for Hyperstar, for focal reduction, and for planetary none of the above. And so that if it may not be the exact weight balance that I want, but it's very close. And I know that if I'm not near my mark on the bottom rail down there, you can see the Sharpie marks that I know that I'm gonna get myself in trouble. And so that's another thing to do during the day. And then of course, the scope, get your appropriate configuration, Hyperstar, focal reduction. You can get it balanced in the cradle first. Not a lot of people on YouTube talk about how to balance your scope and what comes first, what comes last. Balance it in the cradle first. Do the counterweight second, and get it as close as you can. And some of the people talk about making sure that you're heavy on the I think it's the east side, or they call it the right side. But just get it good. And if you neglect your balance, I guess is what I'm saying, is you can really screw up your backlash. And so balance for the beginner, it's really important. And yes, I did screw up my backlash by not getting it balanced well enough. And the reason I did that is I have a Canon tripod holder on top of my top rail, and I put the Canon on there and didn't balance with the camera on. So yeehaw, there you go. There's another one that you can make. That can be expensive if you don't live next to Starry Zona and can get them to get your backlash straightened out quickly. What else? Oh, and of course, if you do this in the daytime, you get it all set up, you get it balanced, you get the tripod, all of that. And then you head into the nighttime, your scope is already temperature acclimated. So that can take some time for some of us. So doing this during the early evening or the twilight and or early afternoon or late afternoon, you can get your scope temp acclimated before your session starts. So, and then you can just do a quick polar alignment and go from there. Now, some of these things I don't do every single time. For instance, most of the time I'll leave my mount on the tripod, and then I don't have to do polar alignment again. And I can find that my star alignment is nearly spot on, and you do a plate solve and you're rocking and rolling. But the things that I would do in the daytime would be including getting those other things set up. You guys on the Astro Imaging channel did a special on the IMM, I can't pronounce his last name, spreadsheet. Fantastic. I loved it. I tried to create my own spreadsheet prior to seeing yours. Came very close to what he came up with, but he just knocked it out of the park with his spreadsheet to help you find what objects are going to be up, how, when's the best time to observe them, the size of the object, nearby objects. The IM spreadsheet is fantastic. And I use it quite a bit. Other things I'll do in the daytime, of course, is Nina for their Sky Atlas and their framing assistance. That'll also tell you what's up that night, and it will also tell you with your current light train configuration how that's going to actually look with your scope, your camera, field reduction or not, or Hyperstar. It'll tell you, if you're getting in too closer, you're just way out. Stellarium and the sky chart, Cartes du Ciel. The one thing I would say there is install your horizon. I won't tell you tonight because it would you could spend a night doing that, but if you install your horizon, you get some landmark recognition. You know where your roof of your house is, and when you don't want to be looking through the heat, the heat waves of your roof cooling off at night, more accurate rise and set times. And this recent Jupiter occultation was fantastic, having the Tucson Mountains outlined on Stellarium, so that I could see that I was actually going to miss, easily was going to miss the disappearance, but the reappearance would be fantastic. And I had the outline of the mountain and which ravine it was going to be in as Jupiter came out of occultation. And so installing your horizon, I neglected that for I don't know how long, and it's something that just is so super helpful. What's up tonight in Stellarium is fantastic, and of course the sensor framing that you can do with Stellarium as well is fantastic. You do have to install star images into Stellarium, but once you do all of that, you got a lot of things you could do during the daytime and not waste time at night hunting down targets that you think you might want to photograph that night. And again, I'll talk to Backlash. It's important. One thing I learned from Starry Zona and Dean again is that PEC, if you're using an off-axis guider, PEC can be controlled by PhD2 in their latest version, and does a really good job of it. And not to turn on PEC while you're using PhD2 and PhD2's version of PEC, because you'll get the two fighting against each other. If you're using Hyperstar, and of course, then you're not going to use an off-axis guider. On some of the longer imaging you'll do, which isn't very often with a Hyperstar, PEC might be important at that time. Now, there's two things listed here that are going to be, I hope not just me, but I had problems with my mount. It wasn't tracking. It wasn't aligning. And I thought, oh God, I got to throw this thing out. It's it's in deep trouble. And call up Star Arizona. No, it's your firmware is probably corrupt. Let's get that refreshed, and we'll get you the latest version in there anyway. And that hopefully will fix the problems that you're describing. Star drift, unable to get close to alignment stars as you're trying to align it. Plate solving absolutely refused to work, and this firmware refresh fixed all of it. And so I guess what I'm saying here is don't give up on an expensive mount just because you're having issues that you think are, you know, inherent in the gearing or something else. It could be as simple as a firmware refresh. The other thing that I'm going to talk about here is I have the Celestron do-ring installed on my 9.25. Absolutely love it. What I learned though is from the factory, that secondary objective that was inside the housing was being held in place by the retaining ring that comes from the factory, and it was really tightened down, really torqued down tight. When I replaced it with the do ring and torqued it appropriately, all of a sudden I found myself with near the terminator, I would be like experiencing 2 to 3 degree drift, very slow, but just you could just see the stars drifting 2 to 3 degrees. And I was like, oh, my mount is absolutely a mess. And then I went in to have the Hyperstar installed, and Dean from Star Arizona, he says, your secondary is a mess, your secondary or mirror is a mess, and your objective is a total mess as well. What we found out is from the factory, the retaining screws that go around to hold that objective tight were completely loose, and they were using the retaining ring to hold that objective centered in the scope. And so when I replaced it with properly torqued do ring and properly torqued that objective was sliding around inside the housing. And you can just imagine what a mess that was. The other thing I learned is that the Bob's knobs that I had installed, I didn't install tight enough. And that secondary mirror was also, it was when I culminated, perfect. And then as the scope would start to guide, the mirror would start to shift, and that would add even more drift in my images. Bottom line was that that objective and secondary mirror have to be they have to be in place and in place tight. And even from the factory, it came loose. It was installed loose. And so that I would have blamed on the mount itself. And here it was my telescope that was causing issues. Thankfully I live close enough to Star Arizona that Dean was able to fix all those problems and get everything tight. And the other thing that I learned, and some people are going to probably argue with me on this, but according to Dean and according to my own experience with my Celestron 9.25, if you do the culmination correctly on that scope, that culmination should last you a year easy. And I find that bit of advice to be accurate. And so it's a matter of how you do it and how well you do that culmination. You can come up with some really good results that last you a great deal of time. Some equipment that I waited way too long to purchase, especially the headlamp, $10 at Walmart. Seriously? I waited this long to get it. It holds a charge all night. It's comfortable. It has a tilt aim. It's got a red LED. It's got a white LED. It's absolutely fantastic. $10. Why in the world did I wait so long? And I just bought that like 5 months ago. I'm just kicking myself for that. Another thing I kicked myself for is the top rail. The top rails are they're so nice for what you can do. And you can see on my top rail, the picture of my top rail there, that front handle, Ace Hardware, $5. I got this knob that screwed right in. I made sure the threading was just right for the top rail that comes from Celestron. It's sturdier than it looks. No more fingerprints all over the tube. You can hold the front with that knob. The back you hold with the handle that comes with the scope. And oh my gosh, what a difference that makes, that knob. And it was $5. Yes, you can buy dovetail handles for $100. They look really cool, but they're $100. But you know, they look cool. and I don't want anybody to get mad, because if I had $100, I would probably do that. Here's my favorite mod. ZWO makes an EAF, an electronically assisted focuser. Love it. It works as advertised. It does everything it's advertised. But one thing it doesn't do is let you manually focus unless you buy the paddle, and that's not even manually focusing. And so what I did was I bought these knurled knobs, knurled knob Allen bolts, and plug those into the EAF. Now, if I want to do a manual focus, I can loosen those knobs up, and that shaft right there in front of you turns into a focusing knob. And what I used to do is it was tight with the Allens that were provided, and I would end up going from, like Hyperstar, you go from one extreme end of the focusing range that the EAF comes with, like from 0 to 6,000, and you just go, you know, you kind of go back and forth, and sometimes I'd find myself bumping up against 0. Can't go any further, can't do it. And so with this, now what I do is I loosen them up. I don't fine focus it. I just generally focus it, get it close, and I leave it at 3,000, tighten it down, and then I can go so far in either direction. It's just so easy to do. And I really love the capability of now being able to, again, manually focus with these knurled knobs. They cost $1.29 for $1.29 a piece at Ace Hardware. The measurements are right there: 4 mil by 16 mil, and 7 mil thread. Don't buy them any longer than 16 mil. If you do, you'll bump up against the bracket that holds the focuser up tight, and you'll end up jamming up your focuser. So the longest I would go is 16. But anyway, there you go. That's my favorite mod. Top rails, cable management. Now we'll talk about cable management. Yeah, I did it. I did cable management at night, and I paid the price, and my cables got snagged. And in my 533 MC Pro, the cables tore out the USB 2, the two of them, both of them, tore them to smithereens, because trust me, your mount motor is much stronger than your USB ports, and totally just devastated it. I was able to I go in with needle nose pliers, pull those wires separate so that they weren't shorting, and so now my camera still works, but I still had the problem of cable management and what to do about it. So I didn't want to do a quick and easy fix. I wanted to do it right, and I wanted to do it for the last time. So here's what I've done. You can see what I've got with this top rail. I have a USB hub in there, a USB 3 hub, and I purposely picked a USB 3 hub that had a very short USB cord out of the hub itself, and I'll explain why. You'll also notice that I have Velcro ties instead of zip ties. Zip ties, you got to cut, redo. Velcro ties, they're much more snug. They're easier to maneuver for different light trains that you'll put on, going from Hyperstar to focal reducer on the back. Easy peasy with these Velcro ties instead of the zip ties. And it just makes a whole world of difference. The hand controller holder. I don't know. Yes?
There was a question come up, and I think that Chandrasekhar is more kind of have a better description of what came loose. Was it the corrector plate that was moving, or was it the secondary itself?
Both. My Bob's knobs weren't tight enough to hold the secondary mirror. The objective was loose because Celestron did not use the outer adjusting screws to hold it in place. They left it loose in there, and they used the retaining ring to tighten it, which they over tightened.
You mean the corrector plate?
Yes. Sorry,
okay.
Corrector plate. Yes.
Okay.
Thank
thanks.
you. Thank you for correcting that. So the hand controller, I found it when I attached it to the leg, half the time when I would meridian flip, the hand controller would get popped out of the holder, and I moved the hand controller holder up to, as you can see, the kind of the onto the scope itself. And boy, what a difference that makes, especially when you put your telegizmo down on top. It just stays in place. Everything's just beautiful. So I'm lucky I have two. I don't know why I have two, but I had two of those. So I keep one on the leg, but I put this one up here, and this is the one I use all the time, is the one in the picture right there. So let's go on. A lot of people, and I think all of us have kind of not made this mistake, but we've done this where we have focal reducers, we have off-axis guiders, we've got spacers, camera bodies, you name it. We thread those on, we tighten them up, and we do our observing session, and it takes an act of Congress to get the things undone. I mean, they're just bound tight. I've seen some YouTubes where they say, go get these cable wrenches to loosen them up. But my idea is, why bind it in the first place? Let's get them so that they're not on there like they've been cemented in place. And I use sewing machine oil. Some people might use electric shaver oil, or even if you got a shredder in your house and you got that oil that you put on the shredder so that it doesn't bind up. But the thing that I would caution about is, don't apply the oil directly to the threads. You will have oil seeping out onto equipment to no end. I say apply it to a microcloth and just real slightly, gently rub it on the, on the exterior of the male and the interior of the female. And what I'll do typically is do it to the exterior of the male, and then I'll take the female and screw it on, screw it off, screw it on a couple times, and just the teeniest amount of oil, and you're golden. You're not binding anymore. It's the easiest fix, and it doesn't take Hercules to undo it when you're done, even with the cable, those wrenches that they use. I've seen some people use. The other thing I talk about in here is the stellarium, checking your back focus. I own a Meade focal reducer, field flattener, and it doesn't seem to follow any of the rules or guidelines. And so when people say 105 millimeters, or they say whatever they say, 63. So what I do is I just take a photo with it in its configuration, compare that to stellarium, and I take the spacers until, if it's a 6.3 stellarium, tell it 6.3, check the star field. When it matches, I'm at 6.3, my back focus is correct, I'm done. Just one way to do it. I mean, I know there's others, and James Lamb has got some fantastic ways of doing it. This I found is the easiest for me. And that's why one reason I like the Hyperstar is because it's configured for back focus for your scope, period. End of question. No, nothing else to do, including if you put a filter in. Other mods, a lot of people use telegizmos for their covers, or there's other kinds out there, doesn't matter which. But one thing that I found was that string on the bottom to hold the whole thing together is a total pain. And the reason is you yank on it, and then you kind of got to pull it through and ease it through. And if you don't do it right, then it's really loose anyway. And a good strong wind will take whatever slack you didn't pull through and pull your cover off. And the Lazy Geek did just that, and he did a complete video on losing some of his equipment to rain because the cover got yanked off in a good rainstorm. And these book binders that I use to hold mine, that binder, what it is it's in between the leg, or it's next to one of the legs, and that book binder takes the two and kind of pinches the two sides together. And right up there, that right there has gone through 50-mile-an-hour winds that I have at our house. Not all the time, but that has survived a 50-mile-an-hour windstorm. So it's good to go. And it's so easy. You just you snap it off, and your cover comes off. I do take that string that comes with it on the bottom. It's elastic. I put it on the bottom bolt that comes off the tripod, and that kind of holds it in place as well. But I don't have to. The book binders does it. The other thing you'll see is the towel over there. I just put that on there so that my telegizmo is going to last longer. I don't want the rough edges of the mount rubbing on the inside of the telegizmo and causing a wear point and eventually a hole. So that's why I put the towel on there. Why do I put the telegizmo on without the scope? There are times when I don't want to leave my scope out and I want to start where I left off. If I do it this way, where I take the scope off, but I leave the mount and tripod in place, I'm star aligned, I'm polar aligned, I'm ready to rock and roll. And all I have to do is a plate solve and bam, I'm ready to rock and roll just where I left off. It's just fantastic. So that's what I do. And I find that when I make it as easy as possible for myself, I'll do it again, and I'll do astrophotography more if I make it easier for myself. So that's what I do. I also have the 12 volt, 10 amp single source power supply. I got it for $30. Don't get me wrong. I tested it for voltage and amperage. It came as advertised, and so I use it. And I use it for everything because I use splitters on it to get my power to my mount and to my camera. The 533, for instance, the 533 MC Pro will not work without power, and so I use that one power supply to do all. And I'll explain why that's important to my cable management as well. You'll notice in the middle picture on the bottom, I got a little kind of like clamp on there that attaches it to the mount to make sure that the cords when you buy splitters and non Celestron power supplies, they don't have the knurled tightening nut on there. So I use that clamp just to make sure the power doesn't come undone. So you'll also see now you're going to see in this picture, two things that are really important to me. The guide scope you'll see at the top, it's got an USB L male, so that when the telegizmo comes down on top of it, it's the USB cord is meeting the flat side of the telegizmo. I had the ones that go straight in, and the telegizmo was just bending that USB cable and bending it, and before you know it snapped. So it's like these L, and you can see it in the 533 MC Pro 2 as well. It's an L, it's an USB with an L male end on it there, so that it doesn't get all bent out of shape by a telegizmo. Now, if you look at the left picture on the bottom, this is why I had the short USB cord coming out of the USB hub. The reason I have that short cable is I then take a USB 3 extension and plug that into the hub, and then that's what gets plugged into my laptop. And you'll notice that right next to the USB cord is a power cable that goes to my all-in-one power supply, and that's going up to a splitter that splits power to my mount and to my camera. Now, the reason I use these short cables that are close to the telescope is so that if these snag, what's going to break is not the USB port on my camera. It's not the power supply port on my mount. What's going to break is the connection right here between these two cables. And yes, my mount will lose power. Yes, my camera will lose USB connection, but at least I haven't totally broken my camera ports like I did before. So that's why I keep them short. I keep them close so that if they snag, they snap away right there. They're available to just pull apart and save me some equipment damage. And by the way, yes, I was really lucky that my USB did not take out my camera when it did break. Oh, and the do control rings, love them, absolutely love them, but I just couldn't see myself paying $260 for the controller for the do control. This 12 to 24 volt LED strip dimmer that you can see in the top photo, it's rated for 6 amps. And yes, it's not electronic. No, it's not temp controlled, but I can control the do controller with this very simple setup. And for me, it gives me what I need, do control at the amount and power that I need to throw at it. And it's simple and cheap. $8 versus 260. Dew shield. Here's a mistake I think I made, and others may chime in and say, no, you didn't. This is great. But I really wish, now that you got the Hyperstar, I really wish I had the hard dew shield versus the flexible one. Yes, the shower cap solves the problem by putting dust control over the open end of the dew shield. But man, I would so much love the look of a hard dew shield and the dust cap that would go on it and protect my Hyperstar. So yeah, there you go. But if you got a flexible one and you want to leave it attached, there you go. Get yourself a shower cap. You're good to rock and roll. If not very pleasant looking, but at least functional. Software, let's talk about that. And I'm not going to get into it too much other than to say it's got some steep learning curves. Beginners out there are going to be very intimidated by it. Just because it's expensive doesn't mean it's easy. Don't fall into that trap. But here's the part that I just recently learned. And for you guys that are there already, yeah, I know. Why didn't I think of this earlier? But do you consider your software costs in the same manner as you consider equipment costs? In other words, you get a new camera because you think it's going to get you better images, and you can spend $1,000 on a new camera and get maybe marginally better images. But if you don't spend the money on your software, PixInsight, the plugins that come with it, and could you not spend the money that way and improve the images that you already have? Which of the two is going to get you more dollar per improvement in your photos? And there you go. For me, COVID wreaked havoc on our healthcare budget. We're now replenishing it. I'm retired. We're getting it back up to speed, but it actually killed my healthcare budget. And so I'm not in a position to buy PixInsight, but if I was to reconsider my purchasing options, I'll bet you I would go with PixInsight and some of those plugins, because the results would be great regardless of the equipment that I had. And when I say that, I also say, yeah, free software is improving with leaps and bounds as of late. This table shows you the software that I use, the software that I want, the software that I'll never use, and some of the software that has some real bonuses to it. And the two that really just stand out to me is SharpCap and PixInsight. PixInsight I don't have. Yes, I want it. SharpCap I own, and I can't imagine not owning SharpCap for the equipment control, live stacking, still doing raw photo generation, go-to sequencing, histogram stretch, folder monitoring. Yes, it uses ASTAP and PhD2. Nina, same thing. Sequence generator report, yeah, it's there. But StarNet++ now works with Cyril, inside Cyril. Astro Sharp, it's a freebie, but somebody just did a YouTube. I can't remember who it was, but they said, they compared them directly. I think it was the Lazy Geek, and he showed you Blur Exterminator. Yes, definitely better than Astro Sharp, but Astro Sharp's what I can afford. So for people out there, it's, you're beginning. Maybe you want to start with the ones that you can afford and make sure that you're willing to get into it, but don't put PixInsight and Blur Exterminator out of the picture just because you're doing stuff with some of the freebie stuff. And then of course there's Stellarium and SkyChart. The reason I put like Registack in here, AutoStacker, when I started astrophotography, and especially planetary solar, I had no idea these programs were there that could create such fantastic images out of Lucky Imaging. I had no idea that you could do these things. And wow, what a difference they make with what a difference this software makes with your astrophotography. And some of you out there right now are just going, yeah, I know it, been there, done that. But for the beginner, some of them don't even know that this stuff exists. Fitz Liberators to check out your flats. you know, it's just absolutely unbelievable what you can and will do with the software that's available. So just kind of able to kind of see what's going on there. Now, I'm going to kind of end with the 5 keys to success with EAA, electronically assisted astrophotography, moving to deep sky or whatever, just moving to astrophotography. And there's 5 keys to success, which is what? 1, framing, focus, exposure, and of course, timing or deep runs, whatever you want to call it. Others would say there's more to it than that, but framing is important. Yes, focus is important and exposure is important. And the thing that I found that's helped me move in deeper into astrophotography is EAA. I can check my framing. I can do it live. I can check my focus. I can do it live. I can check my exposure, do it live, and I can check to make sure that this run that I'm going to do that's going to last hours is actually going to be successful, and do it very quickly. And the other thing I can do is I can enjoy it while it's happening. The thing with SharpCap is, yes, you have the histogram and you're stretching all of it, but the raw images that are coming out are raw. You still have to do the pre-processing, the post-processing. You have to do all that you would do as if you were using Nina to just pump out your lights. And the thing about EAA is I can enjoy doing that by watching it happen live. It's just, for me, it's a game changer in that it brings real excitement to my astrophotography in this portion of it, which is capturing your lights. So that's one take that I just absolutely love about astrophotography now is EAA combined with. And to kind of finish up, Dylan O'Donnell, remember, everything in life we do for others is meaningful to them. And with everything we do for others, we live on. I hope you take that with a good sense of humor, Dylan. I think your presentations are great given that. Any questions? Did I go over? I think I went over.
No, you're okay. You're okay. We did.
No,
Yeah.
there is no over. I'm looking. I don't see any questions. Let's see. There are a bunch of comments, and you had a pretty good audience that held on there.
What
I'd love to know his thoughts. I mean, by the way, my faves SW2. I'd love to know his thoughts on observatories.
Observatories, yes. In fact, I just.
Oh, by the way, Randall, unless you're going to be showing us something in your PowerPoint slides, you can stop sharing and we can watch your face.
Okay, great.
So it's up to you.
I can get out of that then and stop sharing.
Escape.
There we go. And
there
we go. All right.
There you go.
Observatories. I thought for a while that there were so many pluses and no negatives to observatories. And the thing that I've kind of come down to with observatories is, like my telegizmo, putting my scope underneath my telegizmo is not that much different from putting it underneath an observatory. It's still exposed to the cold. It's still exposed to the heat. It's dry from the rain. Not that we get any here in Arizona, but if there were any, it would keep it dry. And so my telegizmo is really putting my telescope under a mini observatory. And I actually think I would love one, but I've kind of watched some people on YouTube that have them, and there are some issues if you don't get a wide open observatory, where you get half the sky open to you, then you have to have the tracking to make sure the opening does track with the scope. And there can be some issues with that when it doesn't track appropriately. And the complexity of Astro Imaging can increase dramatically. Me personally, when I go observing, I like to keep it simple and I like to keep it repeatable. So I do take my scope in, because we'll get 100-degree weather here in Arizona. I'd rather my telescope be inside than outside in 100 degrees. So the only thing I take inside is the scope. I leave the mount out, I leave the tripod out, and I put the telegizmo on top of that. I bring the scope back out. I've got it marked exactly where it was for balance, put it back in the scope, do a plate solve, and I'm rocking and rolling again. So observatories, yeah, I'd have to get homeowners approval, I'm sure. And that, you know, so there's a lot of us in that kind of a scenario. But I'm not so sure I'd go for an observatory if I had one, if I had the option to do it, especially with the cost. So
Kai asked you, well, he's asking you about flats, and you said you had a flat panel, so I think that
yes.
kind of covers it. How about diffraction spikes with Hyperstar?
Oh, again, with my Hyperstar, I'm bringing the cables, and here's the deal. There are things that you can do really right in astrophotography and come up with some great images. There are other things that you can do that are okay, and your images are okay. And my spikes are kind of oblong, almost like the Baskinov mask, kind of they kind of come off because I'm bringing both of my cables to that top rail, and that's why my spikes aren't evenly distributed. And I'm working to get a notch in my flexible dew shield so that I can move those cables to right angles to each other. And the flexible dew shield does hold them in place. So some people they'll get their these 3D printed cable holders so that your diffraction spikes are 90 degrees and looking pretty perfect. But the flexible dew shield will also hold them in place.
So when you take your SCT out, you don't leave it out. How long or how much time do you take to temperature adapt it to get rid of currents?
Like I said, I take it out early. For us in Arizona, 6 o'clock, the sun's not going to be shining on the scope, so I'll take it out as soon as the sun's down, and make sure I got enough light to see what I'm doing, make sure everything's hooked up correctly. But I've done that where I don't change the mount and the tripod anymore, so I don't have to make my cable management's done. The hub takes care of it. The splitters on the power cables take care of it, and so my cable management's done from the very go-get. So I'll put it out first thing in the evening, and even if I wait until for us, it's like 7:30, it's getting dark. 8 o'clock, I'm good to go. So just a couple hours. And in Arizona, in the summer, you're actually not cooling your scope down. You're actually heating it up a little bit. So okay, you take it outside and it's still 80 degrees outside when you take it out.
I asked another question about your flats.
Just a second, Eric. Before we go on, let's explain why Arizona and a desert is different from Ohio, where the temperature doesn't drop. Randall, what can you comment about that?
Well, the seeing, now we're talking different. There's a difference.
Well, just as far as why you need to acclimate, where the temperature falls in the desert, there may be 20, 30 degrees.
Exactly.
Often,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
Whereas in some of the more humid parts of the world, it gets to 75 during the day and it drops down to 68 at night.
Yes.
And there's just not that much of a difference.
Exactly.
So how much you have to worry about that is problematical.
Correct.
Okay.
And and when I bring it out, I can start out, I could start out like at 5 o'clock in the evening. It could start out at 80, and then we're going to be down into 70s by the time I'm doing my observing. So yeah, absolutely. I want to give it a couple of hours, at least 2 hours in my location for my scope.
Yeah. So it may differ. It may differ in other people's. It may differ in other people's locations. Okay, and, Eric, I interrupted you.
Let's see. Let me get back up to the question for the flats. Yeah, Kai asked again. Won't those two cables for Hyperstar, present light leaks for you when you're doing your flats?
Say that one more time, because I do my flats with the Hyperstar with the cables in the position they're going to be in when I do my flats. Does that answer your question?
So you're happy with the flats?
Yes, I put my flats at the end of my dew scope, So it's above the hyperstar, it's above the cables, and I do my flats from there, and I'm getting great results.
Okay, I think that answers the question.
Okay.
While Eric's catching up, you have recommendations for a flat panel for a 6-inch scope?
Boy, recommendation.
BB wants to know that.
The thing that's bothersome about flat panels, especially if you buy an AC, alternating current flat panel, you're going to adjust the brightness by flickering it on and off, and the more you flicker it off, the dimmer it gets. And for us to do our flats, we're ending up in this situation where the light panel is flickering too much, so that your flats aren't accurate, because the flickering is too much, and the camera is recognizing that it's getting this off again image and on again image with the fluctuation of the AC. And it's really important to make sure that you have a DC flat panel or a DC LED panel that is not using on again, off again power fluctuations to dim your flat panel. My flat panel is dimmed by voltage, DC voltage, not by flashing the light rapidly, so to speak. So my flats are coming out great because of it. Did I luck out? Absolutely. Can you buy some flat flat lights that will cause you issues? Absolutely. How I lucked out, I don't know.
You're using a commercially made flat panel.
Yes.
Made for Astro Imaging. Would you mind telling us? Oh,
no, I'm not. And that's why.
Tell us what you do.
That's why I say I lucked out. I made sure that it was DC powered LEDs that are voltage controlled dimming.
So you bought an LED light source from Home Depot or something, and just fashioned it to what you needed.
Well, I made sure that what I was buying was absolutely DC powered LEDs, basically. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. That, in other words, LEDs that are dimmable LEDs, and so this particular product came out with the LEDs that are dimmable, and therefore voltage dimmable versus alternating the current.
And I'll just add to that I also bought I bought a 24 by 24 panel from my 12-inch RC, and it hangs on the wall of my observatory. Park the telescope so it's pointed at it. But in addition to doing that, I put a couple of layers of translucent paper in between, and some translucent what I call milk plastic, and I just built a plywood box to hold the whole thing, and I just turned the dimmer on to a certain level and to take pictures with that.
Yes.
And I'm not sure, BB, if you're looking for the best name LED panel. I don't know.
It seems, the best name seems to change daily. It's like you go in there one day and here's what you get. So you just got to make sure you know what you're looking for. DC and USB. If you're buying a USB flat panel, in other words, it's powered by a USB cable, not by a 120 outlet, you're most likely you could be in a great situation with getting a DC LED display. So that's what I use. You did bring up one thing that I had to cut due to time out of my presentation, and my mount, my CGEM DX mount. You've heard of the milk carton washers, right? To kind of make polar alignment easier for you. Yes. I have done that, and I love it. But I did one other thing to my mount, my CGEM DX.
Wait. Remember, I'm old and cheap. Not everybody knows about milk carton. So tell them about milk carton washers.
Okay. Milk carton washers on the movable parts of your mount, that the part that's stationary that connects to the tripod, and then the part to the mount that moves per your polar alignment, right? East and west, right? That part rests on top of the mount, and that's usually metal on metal. And what's a lot of us have done, and Alex, sounds like you did it too, you take a milk carton, you cut it out, and that plastic that the milk carton's made of is a fantastic a Teflon-ish material that allows then the mount to move on top of that stationary mounting that attaches to the tripod, and so you get some great movement in there. The other thing that I did is not only did I do the major part where the scope connects, but I also looked at the bolt that connects the mount housing to the mount. The bolt was smaller than the hole that Celestron provided in that mount housing. So I took thermal tape, which is a metal tape, kind of like a tinfoil tape, and I wrapped it around that bolt so that when it fit through the housing, that metal tape took up all the slack. And now when I do polar alignment, you don't get these jumps where the bolt kind of moves inside the housing, because the housing now has that tape that has taken up all the slack. And when I do my polar alignment, you got the washer underneath, the Teflon milk carton washer underneath. You've got the tin foil taking up the slack so the bolt's not running around inside that hole in there. And polar alignment is just so easy. It's unbelievable how much easier it is with those two very easy modifications.
And there's a hack that I got from Roland Christian, the owner of Astrophysics, because I was, having screws that bind, and you're unable, once you get them in there, you cinch them down, and they don't want to move, or a filter that you screw in that, oh my God, it's metal on metal. His hack was that he takes the wax from his nose. Now this sounds really dumb, but if you rub your hand on the side of your nose, you'll get a little bit of wax which doesn't evaporate. You put it on the screw or the thread of anything, and that lubrication will be virtually immortal.
Yes.
And it won't evaporate because oils evaporate.
Yes.
They have a vapor pressure, and you don't want that getting into your system.
It's called nose oil. Nose oil. I take that wrong in the comment. Nose oil.
Yes.
And saxophonists use it, and some others. Maybe we should have asked Warren Keller about it last week.
Ben, anything other than those objects binding, if it works, it's like fantastic. And buying things to clamp around and try to twist all that off, it seems to me counterintuitive. So nose oil, I wish I knew about that, because I would definitely have used that as opposed to sewing machine oil. But sewing machine oil has worked perfectly for me. So yeah. And like I said, don't ever directly apply the oil if you're going to do that, if you're grossed out by your nose. So anyway.
Are we all set, Alex?
Yeah, it looks like we've got everybody. Norm's still laughing. Have a fun time laughing on that one, Norm. Leaves me scratching my nose. Anyway, I want to thank you a lot for taking me back through a lot of things that I've done myself, and reminding people that ACE hardware is as much fun as any place else for an astronomer to go shopping. Okay, just remember that. I once read a book about the history of the hardware store, and how does ACE and all the other, mom and pop hardware stores stay in existence. And their strategy is to sell you nuts and bolts.
Yes.
Their strategy is to sell the things that you want to buy, you want to pick up in your hands without a plastic bag or anything, and actually try to use it. Okay.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And I guess I got to say good night for the night, because it's time to go. I want to thank Kim for fixing the noise problem. Thank everybody for staying here with us through it. And we will see you next week when Ron Bretcher comes up and tells us about masking stuff. So, Kim, we ready to go? Take us out.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye,
Good night.
everybody.
See you next week.
Good night.